Hi everybody, I'm Rick Beato. Today I'm introducing a legend in music production, Rick Rubin. From co-founding Def Jam Records to producing iconic albums for artists like Johnny Cash, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Beastie Boys, System of a Down, Tom Petty, and Run-DMC, Rick Rubin has shaped the sound of multiple generations across genres from hip-hop to rock, metal, and country. He's also worked with artists like Slayer, Kanye West, and Adele, showcasing his versatility and genius. His minimalistic approach and deep focus on the artist's authentic sound has earned him the reputation as one of the most influential producers of all time. Here's my interview. Rick, welcome, even though I'm at your place. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. Great to see you.
We talked yesterday for a bit and touched upon a little bit of your beginning. I asked you about playing guitar, for example, or playing instruments. And I know that you've said, I don't really play instruments and things like that, but that's not entirely true. You played guitar as a kid a bit?
I played punk rock guitar.
Okay. Power chords, things like that?
Yes.
Enough to go out and play gigs?
Enough to go out and play gigs, but not enough to play very well.
Tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get into music? When did you know that you had this gift for being a music producer?
I never knew that. I first connected with music, I want to say it was about 3 years old. It was the Beatles version of the Chuck Berry song Rock and Roll Music. And I can remember the feeling in my body of dancing around, hearing that song and feeling like this is something different. Even though I was 3, I knew that that was different than other things and have been in love with music ever since.
Did your parents encourage any type of listening to music at home? Did they each have their own style of music that they like to listen to?
I wouldn't say it was encouraged, but I did it all the time. Okay. I listened to music pretty constantly, self-directed. I took control of the radio whenever we were in the car with the family. I would only listen to the things that I wanted to listen to. I didn't rarely want to listen to what my parents wanted to listen to, although my dad loved Latin jazz. So when I did get to hear that, and I think hearing it when I heard it as young as I was probably had a positive effect.
Are there recordings of your punk rock band?
There are 2. I made a 7-inch and a 12-inch recording of a band, my second band, which was called Hose. They're out of print. I think there were maybe 500 copies of each, but it exists in the world. You
went to NYU 1981, and what were you majoring in at the time?
I started as a philosophy major. I was a philosophy major for 2 years, and then switched to film and television.
So how did you get connected to the music scene in New York City? What were you doing? Were you going out and seeing bands all the time? Were you going to clubs? What were you? Tell me about that.
I went out every night. I would go to CBGB's and I would go to Madison Square Garden. So on the same night, I saw David Bowie at Madison Square Garden, and then later that night, the Bad Brains at CBGB's. I went to Danceteria pretty much every night, and there was an eclectic group of artists performing there on the first floor, and then on the second floor was DJ'd music. So you could hear dance music, and then on the third floor, there was a third kind of music playing. So you could go from floor to floor and hear a lot of different music, and I would go there all the time.
New York City was a very different place back then than when people go visit it now, or even 30 years ago. The 80s was a very different time there. Talk about that, about the diversity.
Yeah, it was fairly run down.
Yes.
There were a lot of boarded up buildings. There were so many nightclubs and so many even late night clubs and then after hours clubs that you could stay out till the next day, every day, if you chose to. And a real wide variety of music, from real heavy disco to, at first you could only hear hip hop on occasion. Like there was a club called Negril which was the only place downtown where you could hear hip hop music. I think it was Tuesday nights, and that was only once a week. You couldn't really hear hip hop other than that. You could hear dance music pretty much all the time, and then there were fairly regular punk rock or rock shows, and I would go to the Ritz and the Peppermint Lounge, both the Peppermint Lounge uptown and then the Peppermint Lounge downtown when it moved. I saw Black Flag play at the Uptown Peppermint Lounge. I saw Africa Bambaataa and Soul Sonic Force in the Downtown Peppermint Lounge. I saw so many shows at the Ritz. I saw everybody at the Ritz.
Do you think that because New York was more run down and musicians were able to live in Manhattan and in New York City in general, that there was a lot more diversity and intermixing of genres, or just even the ability, you're talking about all these different genres of music that you're able to go see?
I wouldn't say it was purely music. It seemed like a lot of young artists of different kinds lived in New York at that time. Soho really was artists then.
Yeah.
It isn't really anymore.
Right.
But it really was then, and you had the sense of more of an artistic community.
How did you get involved with starting your label, starting Def Jam?
The first rap record I made was called It's Yours, with T. La Rock and Jazzy J. Mm-hmm. And that happened because I saw the Treacherous Three play at Negril. Treacherous Three were my favorite group of the rap groups. I met Kool Moe Dee, who was the leader of the Treacherous Three, and asked him if we could meet. And the reason I wanted to meet was I would go to Negril every week. I loved this music, and I felt this energy in this place. But the records that you could buy at that time didn't really sound like that. Now, there were probably three Treacherous Three songs, 12-inch singles on the Enjoy label that really sounded like rap records. Mm-hmm. But the majority of the rap records that were coming out, which were few and far between, one or two a week, maybe, singles, no albums at this point in time, were made by professionals, and the professionals didn't know what rap was, so they made them sound more polished and more like really R&B records than rap records. Whereas if you went to a club and you saw the DJ culture and you saw the drum machines and the DJ culture, it was much more of a raw experimental music live than the records showed. So I wanted to make a record. First, I wanted to make a record with the Treacherous Three because they were my favorite group. They'd already made 3 great records, and now they had signed to Sugar Hill, which I didn't know what that meant. But they now had records on Sugar Hill, and they stopped being great. So, and again, I know nothing about the music industry, nothing. All I know is I love this music. I meet a guy in my favorite band who made great music, and now he's making not as good music.
Right.
And I want to say, let's try doing this together. And he says, I can't. I'm signed to Sugar Hill.
Okay.
And I didn't even know what it meant. And he said, but if you want to make a record, talk to Special K, another member of the Treacherous Three, Kevin. His brother is T. La Rock, and his brother is not signed, and he's really good. So that's how I met T. La Rock. And then we recorded this song, It's Yours, and I had a drum machine that I borrowed from, there was a band, a punk rock band called the Speedies. And Eric, the guitar player in the Speedies, lived in my dorm room, and I borrowed his drum machine.
What kind of drum machine was that?
An 808.
Okay.
So I had that in my room. He didn't really use it anymore, so I kept it in my room for a long time and programmed loads of beats, just for fun. Fun. And it's really easy to program. I still don't really know the right way to program it. I know how I programmed it because I didn't have the instruction manual, so I just found a way to make the sound come out. And I had a PA in my room, in my dorm room, and a DJ set up because I was a DJ at that time, and I would DJ at the parties in the dorm, and sometimes outside of the dorm, and sometimes at Danceteria, but mainly DJ'd in the dorm.
Okay.
At that time, most of the rap records that were coming out were like Curtis Blow or Jimmy Spicer. They were the rapper. And when you went to the club, you saw that the DJ was a really integral part of the way the music worked. And I said, I feel like instead of it being a Tila Rock record, it would be better if it was a Tila Rock and whoever your DJ is.
Right.
And he didn't have a DJ. And my favorite DJ was Jazzy J, who also would DJ at Negril, would DJ at then the Roxy, when the Roxy, Negril moved over to the Roxy, and the scene that became at the Roxy was the same scene as Negril, just in a bigger venue. So I asked Jazzy if he would do the record, and he agreed, and then it became Tila Rock and Jazzy J. And that record was done with a beat that I programmed, Jazzy J scratching, and Tila Rock writing the rhymes.
And where did you record that?
At Power Play, a recording studio in Long Island City, which advertised in the Village Voice, and it was the cheapest recording studio you could find. It was $40 an hour, and we recorded in 3 hours.
Okay. And what was that experience like? So had you ever been in a studio before?
One time before with my punk rock band, or 2 times before with my punk rock band, but still Power Play, and, go in for a few hours and record essentially live. I only cared what it sounded like. I didn't care how it got to sounding like it sounded. If the meters were pinned in the red, sometimes the engineer would say, well, the meters are, it's like, but it sounds good. I don't care. I never cared what technically was happening as long as the sound coming from the speakers sounded good. So my only memories of it were having fun in the studio, trying to make something that sounded exciting, that we all left happy with.
I'd like to take a second to talk to you about this channel. Of the people that regularly watch my channel, 58% are actually not subscribed. So I encourage you to hit the subscribe button now. This will help me to get even more of my dream guests and continue to grow my channel. Thank you. When you say that those records that were done up till that time sounded like R&B records, they were done like R&B records, right? Because the people that were working on them did R&B.
Yeah.
But when you'd go to the club and you'd hear it, it'd be coming through a PA system, and it would have a completely different sound to it.
Well, beyond that, the R&B records at the time were mainly live bands. Whereas at the club, it would be a mixture of drum machine and break beats. So even though a break beat is essentially a live performance,
right?
It's such a small piece of a live performance, and it's usually a drum break. And the DJ is scratching so much that it's obscuring the live performance aspect of it. The live performance aspect of it is still important. It's the reason it's chosen as the source material, but it's definitely manipulated into something new. And that new thing is very raw, and it's exciting. It sounds alive. So that was really what the key was, bringing the DJ to the forefront and focusing more on the power and energy coming from this mix of drum machine, aggressive scratching, often minimal, which was different than the R&B records wouldn't be minimal. They'd be a normal R&B record with a full band playing.
Were people incorporating the 808, for example, the drum machines in were they using them in their live performances?
There was one DJ who wore an 808 with a guitar strap on it. Not when he was using it, but just around the club.
Okay.
And I think that was Grandmaster Wizard Wiz used an 808. It wasn't more popular than any other drum machine.
It had gotten phased out, essentially, I think around 83 or so by Roland, I believe.
It was a obsolete machine.
Yeah. Which then became one of the most popular sounds to be used later.
We used it on a song, a Beastie Boys song called Brass Monkey, which has it's a fast 808 beat that sounds like there ended up being this whole movement called Miami bass.
Yeah.
That all kind of sounds like that. This fast 808 music.
On that Beastie Boys record, one of the tracks has the reverse. You have a reversed 808 on it.
Yeah.
It's
Paul Revere, I think.
Paul Revere, that's right.
Now, here's a little story I got to tell about three bad brothers you know so well. It started way back in history with that Rob and me. My team. Been had a little horsey named Paul Revere. Just me and my horsey in a quart of beer. Riding across the land, kicking up sand. Sheriff slices on my tail cause I'm in demand. One lonely beastie I be. All by myself without nobody. The sun is beating down on my baseball hat. The air is getting hot, the beer is getting flat. Looking for a girl.
So Rick, at this time, to do a reverse beat like that, you have the program beat and you literally would reverse the tape.
Yeah, and I believe it was Adam Yauch's idea to do that, to use the 808 backwards.
I want to back up a little bit because before we get to the Beastie Boys, how do you actually start a record label? How did you know how to do that? How did you learn how to do that?
Because I'd made the two punk rock a single and an EP, there was a record store called 99 Records. Ed Bailman was the proprietor of 99 Records. It was mainly an import record store, mostly dance music, but they had some punk rock. And it was downstairs, tiny little store under an Italian restaurant, I believe. And I would hang out in that store every day. And they put out some of their own records. They put out ESG, Glen Branca, Liquid, the Bush Tetras. So, because I used to hang out there all the time, when I recorded the first punk rock records, I asked Ed at the store, how do I make a record? And he walked me through the process of, there's a place in Brooklyn that can make the labels. There's a place you can have the jackets made here, but there's a place in Canada that makes them even better quality.
Okay.
He told me about a pressing plant. He told me about a mastering engineer and just walked me through all the steps. He's like, you go here, you do this, you go here, you do this. And then when I had 500 records, he offered to distribute them for me, which he did out of his record store. So that was how it started first. And then with the first rap record, it was recorded the same way, and I was planning to do the same steps. And then Jazzy J, who was the DJ on the record, called me and he said, I just met this guy, Arthur Baker. And he's got a label called Streetwise. And I think he'll really like our song. So will you come up and meet him? So I went up to Shakedown Sound, which was the studio that Arthur had. And I played him It's Yours, and he loved it. And he said, we'll put it out on, they had a sub-level of Streetwise called Party Time. And I said, well, I want it to be on Def Jam, but we can have our logo on it and you can do it. Because again, I didn't know how to do any of the parts of it.
Right.
But I just knew I wanted to be able to make records. So I made that record, that's the first record to have a Def Jam logo on it. And that came out, the label says Party Time, but on the sleeve it has the Def Jam logo. I started getting demo tapes to the dorm room at NYU because of It's Yours. So people liked It's Yours. The address of Def Jam was 5 University Place, which was Weinstein Dormitory. And I started getting demo tapes. And Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys, Adam Horovitz, would listen to the demo tapes. And he said, I heard there's this demo tape I think you really like. And that was LL Cool J. It said Ladies Love Cool J. And then LL came to visit, or I called LL and he came.
Came to the dorm room.
Yeah. Yeah. He was 16. I remember the first thing he said when I opened the door, he's like, are you Rick? And I said, yeah. He's like, I thought you were black. At that time, nobody white was involved in rap music at all. It was a really small movement and completely underground. But L came over. He had a book full of rhymes, rhymed for me. And then we decided to make a recording, which we then moved, instead of Power Play, that was the first one, because It's Yours, we made it Power Play. The first record we didn't make it Power Play was I Need a Beat, was LL's first record, and we recorded that at what I called Chungking's House of Metal, because it was really called Secret Sound, And it was such a dump. It was worse of a dump than the place we had been recording before, up 5 flights of stairs in Chinatown. And the proprietor's name was John King, so I called it Chung King House of Metal, because I wanted it to have more cachet than what it really was, which was this really bad place.
Rick, would they have a 2-inch 24 track, or was this on 16 track?
16 24.
Okay.
They had great equipment. The reason we went there was an engineer named Jay Burnett,
okay,
who made a record that I loved that was hard to get. It was hard to get and hard to hear, but sometimes you'd hear it at the rap clubs. It was called Drum Machine.
Okay.
Have you ever heard it?
No.
I'll play it for you.
Check it out. Party machine, party machine, check it out, people, party.
That is amazing.
So I heard that, and I met that guy.
Yeah.
And then that record you couldn't really get, so I asked him if we could re-release it on Def Jam because it was impossible to get, and I just liked it. And then he had the idea because he knew Adam Yauch from Shakedown, Arthur Baker's studio. He was an engineer who worked sometimes at Shakedown, and he said, what about if Adam raps on it? And they did a new version of it, and that was, I think, the fourth 12-inch single we released on Def Jam. But he recommended, he's like, there's a studio, instead of going to Power Play, there's a studio downtown that has a Neve, I think it was an 8028, so a Class A old Neve. I didn't really know what any of this stuff was, but he's like, this is better equipment. You may want to work in this place. So, and I didn't know this at the time, but that place was really a front for a drug running operation. It really was, the studio was only really a money laundering operation for a different business. Again, I didn't know any of this. So we recorded LL's first record, I Need a Beat There. LL was, I think, 16 at the time. And that was the first release on the new Def Jam, like the Maroon label proper Def Jam release.
When you say release, where would how would you do distribution?
I'm comfortable asking questions. So I would go, I was friends with Tom Silverman at Tommy Boy Records, so he would have been a mentor. I was friends with, there was the promotion man at Profile Records, but I would talk to people who were in the independent record business, and, I'm a kid in school, interested, curious, I like their music, and just had questions. How do I do this? Where do I go? And I got a list of I think at that time there were either 12 or 14 independent record distributors around the country. There was one, Big State in Texas, MS in maybe Atlanta, CRD, I think was in California. I can't remember them all. But there were these little independent record distributors, and I'd call them, send them the record, and then they'd order, send me 50 copies, send me 70.
And what would be a typical pressing, 500?
Maybe a start, might have been 500, depended on the record. Like in the case of LL, we may have even sent the song around in advance to get a sense, but we had it set up where we could get reorders relatively quickly. So it was always just keeping enough stock in advance of whatever the orders were, and just running it like a business.
And were you keeping this stuff in your dorm room?
Yeah. I mean, it got to the point where behind the front desk at the dorm, when you come in, there was the mailroom. And eventually, a room probably about this size ended up being completely filled with boxes of records. Once things got going and so many started being ordered that we started getting thousands and thousands of boxes of records.
Right. Now, were your parents saying, Rick, what are you doing? Were you?
I don't think they were particularly interested. They weren't really following.
So they didn't even know what was going on?
Not really. I mean, unless I told them about it.
Did you end up finishing your degree?
I did.
So that would have been, let's see, 85. 85, 86, 87. There's a lot of stuff that was happening in that time period. Can you talk about that?
I remember LL was first.
Yep.
I was working on the Beastie Boys album already then, and then we made Run-DMC's Raising Hell. That was also right around that time. And that was a big deal because they were my favorite rap group in the world. They were the Beatles of rap music. And they came to my dorm room and asked me if I would work with them, which was insane because they liked It's Yours. So then we started working on that record, and that was different. I also got to meet them on the album before Raising Hell. Their second album was before Raising Hell. I played guitar on one song poorly, bar chords, something simple.
With Run-DMC, you had, when you did the Aerosmith collaboration, Aerosmith was really on the outs at that time. Their career was essentially over.
Yeah.
Is it true that the Run-DMC guys didn't want to do the song when you suggested doing Walk This Way, that they didn't want to do it?
They were up for using the music. They were up for the track.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to say the words. They didn't want to do a cover song. They loved the music, but they didn't like the song.
Okay, so how did you convince them to do that?
I don't think I was able to convince them, and Russell, who was Run's brother, eventually said, just do what Rick says. That's how I think it happened. And I explained to them it was a demonstration of something. It was the purpose of the song, of doing that song. We'd already finished the album.
Yeah.
And I listened to the album and I felt like something was missing. And I had this experience in California where someone in the record business who was trying to get me to come work there said, what do you attribute the success of rap to? After all, it's not music. And I remember thinking, it's interesting. This guy's wants to be in business with me, and he's telling me that what I'm doing is not music.
Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's this disconnect. People, if you didn't understand it, you just don't understand it.
Right.
And then I started thinking about how could you explain it? How could I explain to this person? How could I give a musical demonstration that this is, not only is it music, but it's familiar music? And I thought about, well, if I can find a song that's a known song that functions essentially like a rap record, but isn't a rap record, but could function just as well as a rap record, that would explain it. And the first song I thought of was Walk This Way.
Which is, he's rapping. Steven Tyler's
100%,
rapping.
100%.
Yeah.
He's not singing a melody.
No.
You would hear the beat of Walk This Way played in a rap club already. You'd never hear the song.
Right.
But you'd hear the beat. So it was in the canon. Like there's a canon of accepted beats in hip hop at that time. And you could stray from it and you could add to it, but there were certain things like Apache. When you hear Apache, you could picture somebody spitting on their back because it was the music that was used by breakdancers all the time. I don't know how it became the theme song for breakdancing, but it became that. And there were all of these beats that if you went to the rap clubs, there were certain breaks that you would hear everywhere. Billy Squire's Big Beat, another one. Never heard the song.
Right.
But you'd hear the drum sound and that the first beat. You might hear I Love the Big Beat, that much of it.
Probably places that had actual exposed drum beats.
Yeah. It was a break.
Yeah.
And Apache has a big breakdown section with a bongo. People called it bongo rock, but it was Apache.
Who facilitated getting in touch with Aerosmith when you...
My idea was to do the song.
Yep.
And I recorded the track, and then the Profile, who was the label, contacted Aerosmith.
Okay.
And I was surprised. I grew up loving Aerosmith. I saw Aerosmith play at JFK Stadium in front of 70,000 people, the first stadium show I ever was at, and that was in either 77 or 78. Then I saw them play at Nassau Coliseum, and then the next year they played at a club called Speaks, which was maybe 500 people. So I saw the band crumble.
Yeah.
But they were still Aerosmith.
Right.
And we were still, even though Run-DMC was Run-DMC, it wasn't Aerosmith. Run-DMC had never played in a stadium. Run-DMC, it was still big fish in a very small pond. Right. So the label reached out, and Steven and Joe showed up, and I was shocked. But they did. Did they play along with the track that you had? Is that how that... I'd already done the whole track, and Joe added guitar, and Steven sang. I'm going to play the track here. So that's scratching and a program beat. That's Joe Perry playing. And the scratching was, I might have scratched from the original record to get that jun, jun, jun. Can't remember. All that guitar work, that's Joe, and I would not have played that if I was playing guitar on the track. I wouldn't have played that. So when they came in to record the guitar parts, when Joe was playing it there, you're there, and me, Run-D, and Steven were all in the studio at the same time, and it was for some reason because the label set it up. It was a studio uptown that I'd never been to before. When Joe was playing on it, it must have been fun, right, to hear him play that riff over that. Absolutely. And I remember he played a solo that I thought was not great, and I said, I feel like you could do better. If people hear this, they're going to think Brad played it, which is the other guitar player in Aerosmith. Ouch. Joe's like, let me do another take. And this became a massive hit. Yeah, but again, you could never expect it. You could never expect it. It did have a purpose, but it didn't have the purpose wasn't to be a hit. It was to explain rap music is not foreign. That was the purpose of the song. It was an educational experiment or an exercise. It revived Aerosmith's career completely. They went on to have one of the few bands that went on to have a second career. Yeah. Again, all miraculous. It did happen. Do you think it connected with people because they already were familiar with this? Kind of like you giving the example to the A&R guy that this totally makes sense to people. Well, I remember the first station to play it was WBCN in Boston. And Aerosmith's a big deal in Boston. Yes. And the first time they played it, people called up angry. Take that crap off the air. Okay. They were insulted. And then a week later, it was the most requested song on the station. So it definitely polarized the audience, but it had energy. And then based on the success on BCN, it spread to other stations. But it was primarily rock and alternative stations that played it. It wasn't R&B or urban stations that played it. The idea of having real guitar along with program beats and things like that, like with the Beasties that you had guitars, you had programming, you had real drums on some. Tell me about how you started working with the Beastie Boys. How did that come together? Yeah. So I was a DJ. Yep. And they had made a record called Cookie Puss, which was a hip-hop related, I guess you'd say it was a novelty song, because it was like a prank phone call to a Carvel ice cream shop.
Oh, yeah.
Over a funk beat done with scratching. And I remember that I would hear that song on like college radio stations, and I really liked it. I remember I was in San Francisco with my punk rock band when I first heard it and really liked it. And then Adam Harvitz was also in a group called The Young and the Useless, and the singer of that group's name was Dave Skilkin. And I was a friend of Dave Skilkin. And Dave introduced me to Adam, and then eventually through Adam, I ended up meeting the other guys in the band. And then because they were a punk rock guitar band at the time, and they wanted to do Cookie Puss, which was their new single, live, and they couldn't really do it because it was a DJ piece. So they asked if I would DJ for them. And also I had a bubble machine, and they liked the bubble machine, which I adopted. It was at the dorm, and we'd use it sometimes because it was so ridiculous. So they liked the idea of that I could DJ and bring the bubble machine.
Let me play a couple songs from that.
No sleep till.
So that's me playing guitar. That's a DX drum machine.
Foot on the pedal, never Air Force metal. Ain't you running hotter than a boiling kettle? My job ain't a job, it's a damn good time. City to city, I'm running my ride. On location, touring around the nation. Beastie Boys, always on vacation. Think about a stable turntable. I do what I do best because I'm millionaire. Ain't no faking, your money I'm taking. Go coast to coast to watch all the girls shaking. And while you're at the job working 9 to 5, the Beastie Boys had the gun cold kicking it live.
Rick, so that's you playing guitar on that.
Yeah. It's pretty rudimentary.
That answers so many questions.
I don't know.
I think that I think you underplay a little bit on this.
I don't know.
What kind of guitar did you have at the time?
That would have been a Gibson SG Junior. That was
Okay.
the band that I had in my punk rock band, and that was still my guitar. And that's a guitar that when my apartment got broken into in New York got stolen.
Where would you have recorded that?
That
Yeah.
was recorded at Chungking House of Metal.
Okay.
I think our focus really was on the words and the vibe of the raps. And in this case, it was just like a rock track. It wasn't like
It was something to actually just sing and rap.
Pretty much. It was more like a vehicle for the vocals.
But I mean, it's a rock track, though.
Well, that's the music I liked.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up listening to rock music, and that was my taste.
So this blending of rock and rap seems very natural
It was completely natural.
and
was the
connected with people.
It did. It connected with me because it was my experience, but it connected with other people because it was their experience. It was just no one had done it, but it wasn't extraordinary in any way. We think of music in genres, and we think there are country people who listen to country music, and there are rock people who listen to rock music, when in reality, a lot of people listen to all different kinds of music. So I listen to a lot of rock music, and I listen to a lot of hip hop, and this is the result of that. And the fact that it was popular tells you there were a lot of people who liked those two things too.
Right.
Just hadn't happened yet.
When I hear you say, because you're a modest guy, Rick, when I hear you say, oh, I don't know anything about, I was referring to the Anderson Cooper interview.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about equipment. I don't.
No, but I'm telling you, like, if we went to a studio, I could not run a session myself. I couldn't record it.
But you know what the gear is. You know the difference between a Neve and an API.
I do because I've been in places with both of them.
Yes.
But it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, for the technical people who work with me,
Yeah.
the skill they have,
Yes.
I don't have that skill. I can't do their job. I can't sub for them. I can't get by. I cannot do those jobs. I need a technical person who knows how the studio works, and I can say more of this, less of that. And that's always what I've done.
But you have this really unique ability to pick people out that are really gifted at that. Like you have a great ear for records that sound great, and you always have found the best engineers to work with and things like that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's been luck, and sometimes it's been seeking out based on hearing something. I'll hear something like, that sounds better than everything else. Who's the engineer? Maybe we can try working together.
When I interviewed Brendan O'Brien, he told me that George Drakoulias, that you hired to do the Black Crowes record, you said, find the best engineer in town and use him, whoever it is.
Yeah.
And Brendan was working at Southern Tracks, Brendan O'Brien, and Brendan recorded the album and mixed the record, I believe. And then Brendan told me you convinced him to come out to LA to work on the Chili Peppers record.
True.
He and his wife, they took a big leap and did that because of you. He credits you for doing that. I believe that Andy Wallace worked on the Slayer record. I want to talk about that.
Andy Wallace was one of the house engineers at Shakedown, where Adam Yauch worked, and where this Arthur Baker studio. So because Adam worked there, we would hang out there sometimes. We were all kind of friends with Arthur Baker. And, you know, for kids in school, getting to hang out at a real recording studio it was just a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
So we would get to hang out and just see what was going on. And there were 2 DJs who worked there who called themselves the Latin Rascals, who did these tape edit remixes that got very popular, and they were super cool guys. And they would just like make repeat pieces of tape and splice them together. And sometimes, you know, there'd be 1,000 splices in the course of a mix, all hand done. This is all before sampling.
Amazing.
So it was a really creative time in music where the language of hip hop was being developed before what became the tools of hip hop, like sampling, existed. I remember when the first sampler came, when we had our first sampler, and that just changed the way we could do. Because before sampling, if you wanted to use a breakbeat, you DJ'd, or I would DJ the breakbeat. I would DJ it, and the way we typically do it is I would play. Let's say it was Walk This Way, for example. I programmed the beat for Walk This Way, but had I used the breakbeat, the way it would have worked would have been bis dat ba boom boom dat stop, and then bis dat ba boom boom dat. So every other one would happen on track 1, and then on track 2 you'd fill in the in between. So you'd listen and you'd hear bis dat ba boom boom dat, and then bis dat ba boom boom dat, and the first one would play again on track 1, and then you'd do it on track 2. But part of it also was because you were DJing it, it wasn't perfect. But that was part of what was good about it. You'd try to get it, but if it was too perfect, it wasn't really interesting.
Right.
So it was finding this balance of like, sometimes when you just make it, it sounds interesting. So the track sounds much more alive than when you just sample a loop over and over again.
Well, because it's a performance.
It's a performance.
Yeah. Okay, so Andy Wallace, he was working at the studio.
Not at Chung King. The engineer at Chung King, whose name was Steve Ett.
Steve Ett.
Steve Ettinger was his full name, but Steve Ett was what he called himself. And he was the house engineer, and I recorded most of the things that I recorded with him, most of the rap records. And then Andy was one of the house engineers at Shakedown, along with Jay Burnett. He might have mixed No Sleep Till Brooklyn. He mixed one of the rockier songs on the Beasties record, and I think that was the first time I worked with him. And we'd become friends. And then I was going to California to make the first record I made in California was Slayer's first album, Raining Blood.
Yep.
Rain in Blood.
Rain in Blood, yeah.
The song's called Raining Blood.
Raining Blood,
Rain in Blood is the album. I asked him if he wanted to engineer the record, and I played him. I remember this. He came to where I was living, which was on Broadway in this weird loft. So I'd moved out of the dorm, and we had already bought the Def Jam building, but it wasn't ready for me to live in yet.
Okay.
So I was living in this weird, it was really a hallway where they put up a sheetrock wall so that the hallway became smaller, and my apartment was the other half of the hallway.
Okay.
So it was really long and tall.
Yeah.
But super narrow.
Right.
And I remember Andy came over, and I played him a few different records, AC/DC, Metallica, and I had a theory. Now, this is not based on being a musician. This is not based on being a technical person. This is based on being a fan and theoretical, just thoughts. So when I hear very fast music like Metallica, and the sounds are big sounds like on rock records, the whole thing gets blurry and you can't really hear it.
Talking about fast tempos, right?
Fast tempos.
Fast tempos,
yeah, if you're playing, if the music is fast,
yeah,
and if the sounds are big,
yeah,
there's not enough space for those big sounds to live next to happen next to each other.
right.
There's no punctuation.
Yes.
It's just, it becomes a blur. And I played him a Metallica record as an example of what I thought was wrong. And I said, would it be possible to record in such a way that it was hard sounding, but everything was short because it's fast and we want there to be this, I didn't want it to be a blur of bass. I wanted it to be a pulse, to really feel the pulse. And he said, I think we can do that.
Let me play something off that here. That's a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It has incredible clarity with all the double kicks. And when you're playing at a tempo like that, especially with double bass drum, it can get completely blurry.
Woolly, yeah. You could just lose it in a din of sound. And I think both, this is interesting, never thought about this before, but listening to that and talking about the early hip hop records, in both cases, not having the experience of the right way to do it were part of the key. Like if I was an experienced heavy metal producer, I would use the tricks that I'd used on other heavy metal records because that's what people do. You know, you learn the ways to do it. Because I hadn't produced R&B records, I didn't take the tricks of R&B records and taint hip hop.
Right.
And I didn't take the tricks of big rock records or heavy metal records and taint speed metal. It was more subtractive than additive in both of those cases. It was getting back to the essence. It wasn't doing the professional thing. It wasn't using all the normal tricks of the craft. It was reducing them to only what was essential with the particular case in mind.
Now, were they on?
They were on Def Jam.
They were on Def Jam.
Yeah.
This is, to me, the kind of quintessential Slayer record here. And here you are, never really produced a metal record, and yet you produced one of the quintessential thrash records.
And I think that's the reason why, though. I think the reason was I didn't have the baggage of what the old way of doing it was. And in both of these cases, these forms of music were so new that the old way would have lessened their impact. It wouldn't have made them better. I can give you an example of where that happened. I loved go-go music and trouble funk in particular. But there was this whole movement of go-go in DC. I learned about it right after hip-hop, and I loved it. And then Island Records signed all of the go-go groups, and then they were thinking this is going to be the next thing after hip-hop. And they put them with producers, real producers, and all of it got watered down and just turned into regular music. When what go-go actually was this incredible thing that pretty much nobody heard unless you went to a club. I made one record, Junkyard Band for Def Jam, a single. Have you ever heard that?
I have not, no.
Can you go, probably YouTube. Now, what made the Junkyard Band was they didn't have real instruments. They played on garbage. So in some sense, it's not the perfect illustration of go-go, but it's still a raw recording of go-go.
Why didn't this take off, this style of music?
I have no idea. I do think the sound of the produced records undermined the strength of go-go. So the world never got to hear the experience of go-go. If you went to the go-go, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life.
So it really mirrors you going to see these rap artists and the experience in the club, and like, well, the records don't sound like this.
Yeah.
So how do we make them sound like that?
Yeah. And in the case of Slayer, seeing them live and seeing this is a new thing. It has to be presented. If you try to make it like a traditional rock thing, it won't perform. It's not what it is. Recognizing the differences and then supporting the thing to be what it really is.
When you were working on Slayer record, how long would these projects typically take? Do all records take different amounts of time?
Yeah, all records take different amounts of time. Beastie Boys album took 2 years. The Slayer record probably took 4 weeks, I'm guessing.
Is that because the songs were finished and it was just a matter of getting the performances?
Yeah. I went to I think it was Tom's mother's garage is where Slayer rehearsed. So I would go to rehearsal and we would kind of work through the songs there. Although, honestly, Slayer's vision was very complete. The way they played, the songs, everything about them, that was what they did. And my job was really just to document it as well as possible, clearly as possible.
One of the records, I'm going to kind of go out of order here, but one of the records we had talked about yesterday, the Tom Petty Wildflowers record, which to me is one of the most beautiful sounding. And
do you have a way to turn it up?
You belong
the hours. You belong somewhere you feel free. Run away, find you a lover. Go away, somewhere all bright and new. I have seen no other who compares with you. You belong among the wildflowers. You belong in a boat out at sea. You belong with your love on your arm. You belong somewhere you feel free.
This is so beautiful, the sound of it. It's immaculate, and it has so much feel. I mean, it's really, those acoustics, everything about it. Is that Tom playing the acoustic on there?
Yeah.
The feel of it is...
Tom and Mike.
Tom and Mike.
Yeah.
The feel is so just, it has so much vibe.
Yeah.
And it sounds
It's
amazing.
actually a more complicated record than you might. I don't know how much you've ever analyzed the song. Production-wise, a lot happens in this song. Typically, when you hear it, you think acoustic guitar and vocals, essentially. But there are so many events, musical events subtle musical events that happen throughout the song. If you want to listen to it, we could try to talk through them. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
This is Tom and Mike playing. Ferroni is kind of ghosting on time. Not really playing, but
in a boat out at sea. Sail away, kill off the hours. You belong somewhere you feel free.
bass and piano.
Go away somewhere all bright and new. I have seen no other who compares with you.
Octave down on bass, organ, tambourine.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You belong in a boat out at sea. You belong with
And
your
piano's still there.
on your arm. You belong somewhere you feel free.
This is horns, kick drum, snare, which we hadn't really heard before.
Yeah. Perfectly balanced, everything.
Run away, go find a lover.
I think there's harmonium here.
Run away, let your heart be your guide.
Yes. Oh, I hear that.
You deserve
Kick drum.
deepest of covers.
There's another percussion. It might be a shaker, but
at home by and by. You belong among
Triangle.
the wildflowers.
Yeah.
You belong
Horns are back.
somewhere close to me.
The arpeggiated piano.
Yeah.
Trouble and worry. You belong somewhere you feel free. You belong
Beautiful.
somewhere
Yeah.
you
It's like a
feel
second set of
free.
horns come in. a bigger horn section than earlier.
You can hear that harmonium there.
Yeah. And I remember things like when the tambourine goes away, the shaker comes in, and it's all orchestrated. It wasn't recorded like that. It was recorded as it started as Tom and Mike playing and Tom singing, and then all of the production got overdubbed.
Would you call that an additive production in that way?
Yeah, in that way. But what's cool about it is it all happens in such a subtle way that none of it's like, and now here's the horns, or do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like everything's understated, and it serves a function. And even some of the things that you don't hear, like the tambourine or the triangle, subconsciously, the track is evolving. It's staying interesting to your ears. Whether you can hear it or not, whether you could tell or not, these little moments are happening along the way that are keeping you occupied and keeping, again, subconsciously keeping it fresh.
This particular record, we talked yesterday a little bit about this song. You Don't Know How It Feels.
Yeah. There's no cymbals. I don't think we ever put cymbals on.
Interesting.
Let me run with you tonight. I'll take you on a moonlight ride. There's someone I used to see, but she don't give a damn for me. Well, let me get to the point. Let's roll another joint and turn the radio loud. I'm too alone to be proud, and you don't know how it feels. You don't know how it feels to be me.
Oh, I hate to stop that. What was the idea behind recording the drums without the cymbals?
Because we thought of it as a roomy drum sound. If you listen to drum tracks, and if you put up the room sounds, the cymbals are always the loudest, splashiest thing.
Yeah.
And they end up taking over the track.
Right.
So it becomes a limitation in what you can do later. And I remember asking Steve when he played this to not hit the cymbals at all. And if there were going to be cymbals, we would overdub them. And I think the plan was always to overdub them, but for whatever reason, we just never did. And it just probably never seemed necessary.
And the compression on the room mics is what gives it that
Big roomy
beautiful
sound. And that's the sound
sound.
of Sound City, which is a remarkable sounding place.
To me, when I hear that, it's just a perfect example of a fat, real drum sound. What records are you a fan of that you like that would have a sound like that?
The drum sounds I like AC/DC's Highway to Hell album. Mm-hmm. Those are drum sounds that I really like. But one of the things that I've come to learn, I didn't know this early in making records, but I've learned it, is it works better to, instead of imagining like an AC/DC like drum sound on your record, whatever the thing that you have in front of you, whatever the snare drum you're using, the best version of that drum sound is going to be better than trying to make it sound like AC/DC.
Right.
So early on, we would try to make things sound like things we liked. It does not work. But if you take whatever it is and make it sound the best it can possibly sound, it's going to sound interesting. You may have to switch out the snare, that's another possibility. But typically, using the things you have and making the best of what those things are, instead of trying to turn them into the thing that you wish they were, is a really good way to go.
The other thing about this is that Tom's voice, the blend of it in with the tracks has such a unique sound to it. I can't even tell if there's reverb on the voice.
Yeah, I don't think there is.
Just the tone of it is just fantastic. Tom was
That goes to also what I was saying about whatever the thing in front of you is, make it sound the good version of what that is. In a way, that goes to the vocal not having reverb. It's like, what does his voice really sound like? And how do we put it up front where it feels like he's singing into your ear and really hear, like sometimes you can even hear him breathing or a mouth pop, not looking for perfection so much as looking for reality and getting closer to who he is, to where you feel like he's singing to you.
I asked you yesterday when we were talking about that, about having the dry vocals without reverb for people that are not technical. He's out in front. He's talking to the audience. He's the leader of the band, and his voice is out there. It's dry, let's say. And then the band is behind him, kind of how it would be spatially. Mm-hmm. Do you think in that way? Or your thing is for the clarity so you can hear the lyrics and the melody?
It's more the clarity. Hearing the words and hearing the human behind the words. Something where I can feel the person more.
Now, someone like Tom, would he have had a particular microphone that he likes on his voice, or is this something that you would want to be involved in choosing?
If there was one that he liked, we would probably use it. If he didn't have one that he liked, we'd probably test a few and all say what sounded best.
How much is the artist's comfort in what they're doing important to you?
It's very important, unless it undermines what we're doing, which it can be the case. It's rarely the case, but sometimes there's just a disconnect. Like I got to do a track with Roy Orbison, and he really didn't want to sing the high note at the end of the song, and you really want Roy Orbison to sing the high note at the end. Right. So it was not, he wouldn't have chosen to do that, but I didn't feel like it was a proper Roy Orbison record if he didn't do that.
When Tom was writing lyrics for this, were his lyrics done? Did you guys talk about them? What was his process like?
He would call me up to come over to his house in Encino and play me typically 3 or 4 songs at a time. And we would do this over, another album was probably a 2-year period from starting until it was done. It wasn't 2 years of working every day, but it was, here's a batch of songs, let's talk about them. Here's another batch of songs, let's talk about them. And got to the point where there were probably, maybe the first time we went in, there might have been 10 or 12 songs. Might have even been less, but I think it was 10 or 12 songs that we went in and recorded. And then we did that whole same process again over more time. And the goal of the studio recordings was just getting the basic track. And we tried to do that as quickly as possible. And then all of the production happened in Mike's studio after. And that took a long time. And I could remember, I would drive from Hollywood out to the Valley. It would take about an hour to get there. And then we might spend the whole day working on the bass on one song, would be typical. Mike would usually play the bass, mm-hmm. and we would go phrase by phrase. Like he might play a pass first, and then we would think of it like the orchestration of the song, like more in a Beatles way. Like in each moment, what can the bass do that advances the story? And it would take a long time.
When Tom would play you demos, would he actually have recorded demos of the songs typically?
Often recorded demos. Sometimes he'd play the songs on acoustic guitar. Or sometimes he'd play me the demo, and then we'd talk about it, and I'd say, can you play it, and what's it like if we double the pre-chorus, for example? What would that sound like? And he would do that. And we would work on the shapes of the songs just acoustically before.
How often would you guys use click tracks? And historically, on records you made, how often would click tracks be used?
We go through phases. Some drummers love click tracks.
Yeah.
Some drummers only want to play with it. And as a drummer I work with, Chris Dave, who's I think maybe the best drummer in the world, he only likes to play with a click track. Now, he plays great without it. He really likes to play with it. So I wouldn't argue.
Right.
And there are some bands that don't like to play with click tracks, but the click track could help. So what we might do is use the click track in rehearsal to get used to playing it in one tempo, and then take the click track off when we record it. And sometimes they can do it and sometimes they can't.
Right.
But I would say often we don't use them. Often we don't need them. Often we're looking for something different than what the click track provides. But it really depends on the artist. So in Tom's case, we would rarely use the click track if the band was playing together. But on a song like Wildflowers,
you need the click track.
we would probably, any of the acoustic-based songs that we would build, another one would be Only a Broken Heart. That one for sure was played to a click track. And this was just 2 guitars to a click track first, and then the drums got added after. Everything got added after.
Here comes that feeling.
You could hear it. It's
Yeah.
Seen in your
But it's part of the strength of the song. This song, without a click track, this song wouldn't be what it is.
for the hard times, but I'm not afraid anymore. It's only a broken heart. I know the place where you keep your secrets out.
Hear the bass, Walt?
Yeah.
The sunshine down in a valley, but I'm not afraid anymore. It's only a broken heart.
Tom is such a great hook writer. I mean, he really would come up with the most brilliant hooks.
He was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Talking about click tracks, I think in general, all of the philosophical ideas of like, it's better to make music with a click track. It's better to make music without. It's better to record on tape than digital. It's better to record. Whatever they are, it is always case specific.
Right.
There are no right answers.
Right.
And sometimes it's nice to record in tape. Sometimes it's nice to record digitally. And there's not a right or wrong. There might be a right or wrong for a song or for a project.
Right.
But there are no rules like that. And it's real, there's a real freedom in knowing that none of the rules about the right way to do it, none of those are real. Those are all made up rules. And you can discard all of them. You could use them if they're helpful, but as soon as they get in the way, discard them. And there truly is no right way to do any of it. We talked yesterday about many bands like to record the drum track and then add the guitars and then add the bass and then add the vocals last. Or they have their own order. Some like to do acoustic guitar and vocals to a click track and then add the drum track and then build it up from there. And artists have their own way of doing it. And again, there's no right or wrong way.
And it can be changed throughout a record. This song with a click track and start
there are
with the guitars.
some bands who really thrive on the way that they do it, and it's okay. I remember when I produced Linkin Park the first time, the idea of them playing together as a band was so alien to them. In the past, I think they'd made 3 records before that. Not only had they never played together on any of their records, they never played their songs together until they played them on stage. They were always made in the studio. That's how they worked. So we tried doing it in the studio. We tried playing together in the studio, and it was interesting sometimes, but it didn't have to be that way. It's always interesting to test, to test those the way you've done it before. Is there a new way or an old way? that works better. We don't know until we test it. But to assume there's the one way is never the case. You never know.
I want to move back in time here. I want to talk about the Chili Peppers. You've worked with the Chili Peppers many times, but to me, one of the most important records of the 90s, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. I want to play that exact song here because that is an amazing song. Now, to me, that's one of the best sounding tracks. It sounds phenomenal.
It sounds great.
When you hear that, don't you?
Yeah, I haven't heard it since we made it. And it sounds really cool.
It's just so
You have
powerful.
to also keep in mind, they're really a good band.
Yeah.
It's like they're an incredibly good band.
Talk about how important that is, Rick.
It's why I say I'm not a musician. They're some of the best musicians in the world. Chad, Flea, and John, those three musicians.
Incredible.
I don't know that you can find better musicians than those three musicians. It's peak, whether you like their music or not, their ability to play is
amazing.
On another planet.
Yeah.
So what you're hearing is, yeah, it sounds good, but it sounds good because it's them playing it. If three other people were playing those instruments, it wouldn't sound good.
Right.
With the same setup. It's in the touch. It's them. The way they attack their instruments. Obviously, some good choices were made in mic placement, but you could have the exact same mic placement with someone else playing, and it would not be that.
Now, how long did that record take to make?
I think we were in the house for either 6 weeks or 2 months, something like that.
And was that a record where most of the lyrics would be done beforehand?
Let's talk about leading up to that album, because it was very interesting leading up to the album.
Okay.
The band was on EMI Records, and they decided to leave EMI, and originally they were going to sign with Epic. There was some complication, and this was over more than a year. So we had worked we had been doing pre-production for about a year, thinking we were going in to record, and then all of the business complications, which were completely out of our control, like you can't record yet. If you record it, it's still under your EMI contract, and Epic's trying to work out a deal with EMI, but it's not happening, and we were just in this limbo phase. So we ended up writing probably the equivalent of a whole nother album and worked for a whole nother year in preparation just because we couldn't go into the studio. So part of what makes that album is it was essentially 2 album cycles worth of writing and preparation before we ever went into the studio.
Wow.
So by the time we went in, they were very well prepared. They were 2 albums prepared.
Do you find that writing is like working out? The more they write, the more in shape they get? Or is it that the inspiration just randomly, a song will come out of the blue?
I think both are true. I think there is a writing muscle that when you practice it, you get better. And the more you do it, the better it is. That said, there are these moments of inspiration that are outside of that realm where something comes and it's not based on your practice, or if it is based on your practice, it's some tangential, it's not just another day. It's not doing your daily office hours of writing.
Right.
Something else happens, but you can't depend on those. You can't wait for those. So it really is, both are true.
If you had to say on that particular record, were there songs that were late songs that were standouts?
I honestly can't remember the order of the songs, but I will say, before we go into the studio, let's say we have a list of 25 songs, and let's say we were to prioritize those songs in terms of favorites before we go into the studio, and then we record all 25 songs. After the recording, it's an entirely different priority list. So I'm wary to ever prioritize anything until it's done. Because sometimes one of the songs on the C list, you have the A list and the B list, and then the C list, if you get to it, sometimes the C list songs turn out to be the best songs on the album. Because things happen, and sometimes A songs might not be the best song, might not even make the album once they're recorded.
Yeah.
Because stuff happens, and we're not in control of it. There's a Tom Petty song called Climb That Hill Again. When he wrote it and played it for me, I thought, this is the best Tom Petty song I've ever heard. And we tried recording it, and we recorded it for maybe the Echo album, maybe. And then it just wasn't good enough. Could never get it. And then we tried recording it again. We recorded it a few times, and it ended up coming out on something, but it still was not close to what it could have been. And I can't tell you why. I don't know why. We never cracked the code in the studio.
Interesting.
There are 2 different versions that are floating around, both of which are okay, but none of them rise to the potential of the song.
How many extra songs do you like to have? Do you have an idea making a record that this record's going to be 10 to 12 songs, but I want to record 16? Or is it you record as many songs as you feel are worthy of doing?
I like to record every single song we have. I don't rule anything out. And it's not uncommon to record 30 songs for an album that will not have 30 songs.
And what's the process of going through deciding on what's going to make the record?
A democratic process within the band. We all, like in the Chili Peppers, usually like half of it becomes very obvious. Like everybody votes, and then half of the songs everybody voted for, and those are on.
Yeah.
And then only the second half is what's in question. And then typically it'll be which song has it's usually 5 votes, because the 4 band members and me, I get a vote, and we all vote, and then we tally up, and then we see what fits where. But then sometimes when you get past the democratic part, where all the 5 votes are in, all of the 4 votes are in, and then what happens after that is more like, let's start over, let's rethink. Because sometimes there's a song that's not obvious but has some charm that somebody might want to really argue for. And we listen, we talk about it. It never gets, I would say it never gets ugly. And the real job is getting to that, when we agree on 8 out of 12, we're in pretty good shape.
Right.
And usually the problem in deciding the others is there's too many good songs. We're never in a situation where there aren't enough good songs with a band like the Chili Peppers. It's always like, how are we going to do it? How can we do a single album? That's the argument, is like, we want people to hear these songs. We like these songs. So that comes up.
Were you guys surprised at how big that record was?
I'm always surprised. I'm always surprised when anybody likes anything. Because there's so many barriers in the way of things getting through. You know, you can have someone can put out an album. I remember the first System of a Down album came out on 9/11. Wow. Nobody was talking about music at that time.
No.
They worked their whole lives to make their first album.
That's right.
And the day it comes out, there's a catastrophe.
Yeah.
And they have a song with lyrics about jihad.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. It was remarkable. So there are so many things that get in the way, or, you know, Beyonce decides to put out her album on that day. It's like, we have no control of that.
Yeah.
So there's so many factors. Anytime anything gets through, it feels like a win.
We talked yesterday a little bit about this song.
Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. Sometimes I feel like my only friend is the city I live in, the city of angel. Lonely as I am, together we cry. Drive on the streets 'cause she's my companion. I walk through the hills 'cause she knows who I am. She sees my good deeds and she kisses me windy. Well, I never worry, now that is a lie. Well, I don't ever want to the place I love, take me all the way. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. Take me to the place I love, take me all the way. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This, to me, Rick, sounds every song on here just sounds like it's just played live.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, it was.
When I interviewed Brendan, he talked about the intro that you guys added that later. John came up with the picking thing, and that was an overdub. But the rest of the track literally sounds, the bass part, when I hear it, like all the little fills in there, the extra little, you know, cross sticks and the snare and everything just sounds played right by them.
It is. It's live, and the way the song came about was different for them because they'd never done a song like that before.
Talk about that.
Historically, they were a band that played funk music with rap vocals.
Yes.
And that was the Chili Pepper sound.
Mm-hmm.
This was a song that wasn't supposed to be a Chili Pepper song, and it was a lyric or a poem that Anthony had written. And I was looking through his lyrics. I went to his house, and he was just showing me his lyric books. And I was looking, and I said, "What's this one?" And he said, "That's not for the Chili Peppers." And I said, "Well, read it to me." And he read it to me. I was like, "It's really beautiful. Why would you say it's not for the Chili Peppers?" He's like, "It's not what we do." And I said, what about playing it for the other guys, singing it to the other guys? And he was shy about it. But he said he would play it for John. He would sing it for John.
Okay.
And he sang it for John, and John came up with the guitar part. And then John and Anthony brought it to the studio with the guys, the rehearsal, which was the alley, was where we were rehearsing. Have you ever been in the alley?
No.
Super cool place. John and Anthony sang it for Flea and Chad, and they loved it. And then it became a Chili Pepper song. And because of that, it then broke open the frame of what the Chili Peppers were to it could be anything.
Right.
That was really
That's
the
a
point.
big thing.
It was. And it was knowing that they were more than a sound. That if the four of them liked what they were making, and if it was a true expression of the music that they made together, that's what the Chili Peppers was. The Chili Peppers were not rap lyrics with funk grooves. That was an aspect of them, but it didn't define them.
I've seen the Chili Peppers play many times. As a matter of fact, they're one of my favorite bands live. They're an amazingly fun band to watch.
Unbelievable.
And
they're such good musicians.
They're such good musicians. They sound like the record. They have incredible energy. Their music connects with people even today. Kids, it's ageless, really. Why do you think that is?
I don't know, but I think there's a spirit and energy in the music. It's free. Like they're really rooted in this thing, and it's not an intellectual process. They're feeling something, and it comes through them, and we're lucky enough to get it, see it come through them, because it really does come through them. And we get to a section where John plays a solo, and it feels like the sky opens up.
Right.
It's insane. And it's different every time, and it's just like it's coming through. It's wild. It's wild to see it happen. Like listening to Under the Bridge, the song is beautiful. The guitar part is beautiful. Mm-hmm. The bass line is unexpected and wildly cool.
Yes, wildly cool.
All the parts are interesting. None of them are ordinary.
Yeah.
You know, it could sound like a little folk song.
Yeah.
But they're so original in their musicianship, what they bring to it. It's remarkable. And you've seen them live, and you know that's how it is how they are. It's how they are. It is them. They play like that. And if you put mics in front of them, it still sounds like that.
I find that they don't get in each other's way with their arrangements, with their parts they come up with. Flea's part, he plays chords in it, then he goes to single notes, and there's spaces in it. And John's part has its own space. It's got its own groove to it. And Chad is doing his own thing. And they're really almost like an orchestra or something.
Yeah, it is. It's an orchestral arrangement played on 3 instruments.
There's very few bands that are like that really can kind of connect through multiple generations. And they've been able to do that.
Mm-hmm. They're just tapping into something that's really happening, and everyone can feel it. Not everyone likes it. But I think even people who don't like it, if you go see it, you'll feel something's happening.
Absolutely.
Something is happening. And it feels like it's bigger than the guys on the stage. Like it's some energetic transmission that's going on. And it's always there. It's not like they have good nights and they have bad nights. They do have good nights and bad nights, and it's always there.
Right.
Regardless.
Yeah.
I've never seen them not just summon the energy of the planet in their playing.
I want to play
Psychic spies from China try to steal your mind's elation. And little girls from Sweden dream of silver screen quotation. And if you want these kind of dreams, it's Californication. It's the edge of the world in all of Western civilization. The sun may rise in the east, at least it's settled in a final location. It's understood that Hollywood sells Californication. Pay your surgeon very well to break the spell of aging. Celebrity skin, is this your gender? Is that war you're waging? Firstborn unicorn.
is a fantastic vocal performance by Anthony. I was trying to find out who mixed this record. Do you remember who mixed it?
We started doing this thing with, we called them shootouts, where we would give 3 different songs from the album, so like the same 3 different songs.
For 3 different mixers.
To maybe 6 different mixers.
Okay.
And have them mix it. And then we would listen to them blind without knowing who mixed what. And I think it was this album where we had an idea of what the album was going to sound like. And there was one of the mixers, it really sounded exactly like we thought it was going to sound. And then there was another one that was not like we thought it was going to sound, and we loved it.
Okay.
And we ended up going with that one. And I think that might have been this one, and it might have been Ryan, but I'm not sure.
Okay, I want to talk about mixing and your listening. Like, where's your place to go to check a mix?
Typically in the car.
Okay.
I like to listen in the car. I can remember with Tom Petty, we were mixing Wildflowers, and there was a rented Toyota that Richard Dodd, the engineer, had, and that was our reference sound system for Wildflowers. And we'd bring cassette tapes from the studio out and listen in the car. And we would obviously work on the mix in the studio and want it to sound great in the studio, but if it didn't sound good in the car, it didn't matter. And it was always, that was the final test was the car.
Nowadays, people listen on phones.
Yeah.
And records that weren't made to be listened on phones, but a great mix sounds great anywhere. These songs, all these songs sound phenomenal on the iPhone. Yeah. Did you ever imagine that people would be carrying around little things like that?
I will tell you, I remember in the old days, back when we still had tape machines and stuff, we used to have this little speaker called an Oratone.
Yep.
So even though we would mix on bigger speakers, we would always listen to the mix back on the Oratone. And if it didn't sound good on the Oratone, which was not a great sounding, it was a sort of like the equivalent of a transistor radio.
Yeah.
And if it didn't sound good on that, something was wrong. There was also a tape machine, an Ampex half-inch tape machine that had a speaker.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That could also function instead of if we didn't have the Oratone, if we had that half-inch machine, we would listen on that little speaker. And if it sounded good, like if you couldn't hear the bass on the little speaker, bass might not be loud enough.
Right.
Or the kick drum. If you couldn't hear the kick drum there, we got to look at it.
And you've had many different people mix records over the years.
Absolutely. Whoever wins the shootout, basically, is how it works. And the same with mastering. Many different mastering people. It ends up being some of the same ones because they end up winning a lot. But I'm always open. And if I hear a record that I think sounds great, I will test out either the engineer or whoever mastered it. I'm always trying to find the best people. And another thing that's interesting is sometimes it's the right person for the right project, where one mix engineer just hears it in a way that's interesting. Doesn't mean that they're the right person to mix everything, but for some reason, they have a sense of this project and really bring something to the table. So we're always looking for anyone who can help make it as good as it could be.
I want to move on to System of a Down.
Great.
Rolling Suicide.
Self-righteous suicide. I cry when angels deserve to die.
Okay, so a song like this that is really multiple genres put together, right? I mean, how would you say that?
I don't know. I remember playing this for Tom Morello and him saying, "That's crazy person's music."
It sounds so normal now. I've heard it so many times.
Yeah,
but the first time I heard it, I was like,
It's definitely a head scratcher at first.
how do they present a song like this to you?
They just play it for me. The singing choruses are so undeniable.
Yes.
Like and we stop, but it where it goes from there is really dramatic and beautiful and technicolor.
Yes.
You know, it's like
Yes.
it's wild. That the quirkiness of the verse. And I can remember talking to Serge like, really, this is how it goes? He's like, yeah, that's how it goes. And he's like, I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to sing it, and then I'm going to repeat it. And like, okay.
When you find a band like this that is so unique, and I think a lot of the projects that you pick to work with are so unique. There's really no other Chili Peppers out there. There's no System of a Down out there. Mm-hmm. Is that helpful to find the audience for music like this, you think? That
No, it's the opposite. It's much harder.
Yeah.
It has to be so good that you like it in spite of the fact that it's crazy person's music. I remember when we put out the first System of a Down album.
The self-titled one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The program director at K-Rock, which was the premier station that would play that kind of music in the world, said, and they're an LA band and it's an LA station, they said, we will never play this band on our station. Never. And again, a year later, #1 requested group on the station.
There you go.
So it's like, with all of these things, we're fighting uphill because they're not really supposed to be popular.
Right.
They're too weird.
You were a label president, and then you're a producer. They're two completely different roles. Are they related at all?
Well, for me, they are, in that I like weird things. I like being surprised. I like hearing something I haven't heard before. I like being challenged by music. And when something can do that and I like it, instead of just be annoyed or hate it, which can happen, when something's really is just not for you, not my cup of tea. That happens a lot. Mm-hmm. But when it's something I haven't heard before and it's really compelling and exciting to listen to, I want to nurture it. Now with System of a Down, I don't think I thought this is going to be as popular. With none of the bands, none of the artists I work with do I think this is going to be popular. It wouldn't be realistic. If you saw System of a Down, when I saw System of a Down playing at the Viper Room, 200 people going crazy, and them doing sort of these like Armenian folk dances and playing heavy metal, like I laughed the whole show.
Right.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I loved it.
Yeah.
But any thoughts of like, this is going to be big, you could not have that thought. It would be insane. But I loved it. So it made sense. It's based on the emotion of it more than the where does this fit. I never consider where does this fit. It's something I wrote in the book, The Audience Comes Last.
Yeah.
I really believe that. Not because it's if you start making decisions based on what you think they'll like, you're going to water it down. The best version of it is the real version. And then some people love it and some people hate it, and it's okay. That's how it's supposed to be.
Right.
If you water it down for more people to like it, then the people who like it won't like it as much. And for the other people, it'll be passable, it'll be okay, middle of the road. Who wants to be middle of the road?
A lot of people, apparently.
I guess.
Unfortunately.
I don't know. It seems strange to me.
I thought that was a trick question, right?
No, it seems strange to me.
No, I agree 100%. Okay, this is an incredibly important collaboration that you had with Johnny Cash. I'll start with this.
I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. The needle tears a hole, the old familiar sting. Try to kill it all away, but I remember everything. What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away in the end. And you could have it all, my empire of dirt. I will let you down, I will make you hurt. I wear this crown of thorns upon my liar's chair, full of broken thoughts I cannot repair. Beneath the stains of time, the feelings disappear. You are someone else, I am still right here. What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away in the end. And you could have it all, my empire of dirt. I will let you down, I will make you hurt. If I could start again, a million miles away, I would keep myself, I would find a way.
Now, that song, I Couldn't Stop.
Yeah.
Tell me about the choice of that song.
At that time, I had already made 5 albums with Johnny. This was on the 6th album. And we were always looking for songs. He would write 1 or 2 songs typically on an album, and then the rest would be covers. And what I came to realize was the things that worked best, the key was the lyrics. And that if the lyrics were right, it didn't really matter what genre the music was or where it came from. I remember one of the early ones, we did a Soundgarden song,
I was going to play that.
Rusty Cage. And that was one of the first ones where Johnny, I remember sending him the Chris Cornell version, the Soundgarden version, and he listened to it and he's like, what are you thinking? Like, I can't sing that. If it'd be interesting. Can you play a minute? Not of that. Can you play a minute of the 9 Inch Nails version of Hurt? Because it's interesting to hear. Because when I sent him the 9 Inch Nails song, he just thought I was crazy. But listen to it and you'll see.
I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. The needle tears are holding the old familiar sting. Try to kill it all away, but I remember everything.
You know, it's very faithful, actually.
Yeah.
Minus the really dissonant chord that's in there.
Yeah.
It's very faithful to
And
the original.
the sound, like in Trent's version, this beautiful song is buried
Yes.
in this sound.
Yeah.
And that's what he was going for. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It closes a magnificent album.
Yeah.
But when I played that for Johnny, he didn't hear the song.
Were you there when you played it for him
I sent
in
it
person?
to him. I sent him a CD, a burned CD of probably 25 potential songs, and that was number one. I remember and then when he called me back, he didn't respond. He didn't respond to that one. He responded maybe to a couple of others, and then the next CD I sent him, it was number one again. It's one of the only songs that I probably sent him 3 times in these compilations I would send of songs to consider. And he never responded. And then finally, I said, "There's that song that I sent you," and he's like, "Yeah, I don't hear it at all." And then I think I might have done a demo. I think I was in the studio with Smokey Hormel working on something else, and I had Smokey play the acoustic part, and I might have sang the vocal myself, just as a demo of more like what the Johnny version would be like.
Yeah.
And I said, "It can sound like this.
Yeah.
Just read the lyrics."
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that was what convinced me. He's like, "Okay, I'll only do it when we're together." Because sometimes I would send songs and he would have musicians in Nashville. He was too ill to travel. And we would get together on occasion, but we were working a lot at that time because he wasn't able to tour, he wasn't able to travel. He could only sing when he could sing. So he would try singing every day, but he couldn't sing a lot of days.
Yeah.
So we couldn't be in the same room. I would be there forever and very little would get done. And he was also really down on himself when he couldn't do it. So it would be frustrating. So we set it up where he could work at his house. Musicians would show up every day. They would record every day. And if they would get anything, that would be the basis that we would start with to work from. But this was when he said he didn't want to do that way. He wanted to do this one when we were together. And he was planning on coming to California. It was probably, it might have been the last time he came to California. And we recorded it together with the band and everything. And I remember the build-up at the end of the song. I had all these different instruments in my studio, and Benmont was the keyboard player. Mm-hmm. In each spot where it keeps developing, we would try every keyboard in the room, just see what sounds good. And so try that one, the Con organ. No, that's not it. Let's try this one. Try the bass key, the best pedals. What does that do? And just like trying to find this. And it's another example of technically it not being done properly. Like at the end of the song, it gets completely distorted and the meters are in the red in the mix. Like it was, but it sounded like that. You know, it's like, it's okay. It's like, I know technically the equipment's not supposed to do these things, and technically it can sound like it's broken, but that's the sound. That's what it is. That's where the emotion is.
Right.
So it's okay. You know, I've been in sessions where the speakers have caught on fire. So, for real. For real.
Then you know you have something.
Well, it's interesting. You know, at least, yeah, something happened.
Speaking of Rusty Cage, it's another one I wanted to talk about here.
You wired me awake and hit me with a hand of broken nails. You tied my lead and pulled my chain to watch my blood begin to boil. But I'm gonna break my rusty cage and run. I'm gonna break my Gonna break my rusty cage and run. Too cold to start a fire, I'm burning diesel, burning dinosaur bones. I'll take the river down to Stillwater and ride a pack of dogs. I'm gonna break my rusty cage and run. I'm gonna break my rusty cage and run. When the forest burns along the road, like God's eyes in my headlights, when the dogs are looking for their bones, and it's raining ice picks on your steel shore, I'm gonna break my rusty cage and run. I'm gonna break my rusty cage and run. I'm gonna break my rusty cage and run. I'm gonna break my rusty cage and run.
Now, that sounds like a Johnny Cash song.
Yeah, I forgot that the band came in the second half. I didn't remember that. It was cool. Good surprise.
When he gets to the bridge and he does the spoken word, it's so Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
When you sent him that song, though, he was...
Well, play a little bit of the Soundgarden version and you'll see why.
So he heard that and he's thinking,
what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Have you ever heard how I sound? Have you ever heard me sing? Have you ever heard any of the music I've ever made over 50 years?
And yet you guys made it a Johnny Cash song.
We did.
I love Rusty Cage. It's one of my favorite Soundgarden songs. And I remember when I heard Johnny's version, I thought, that's amazing. I mean, it is so great.
That whole second album, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers were the band. And the way it started was Tom was going through a divorce and kind of in a weird place. And he loves to play bass. And he loves Johnny Cash.
Okay.
And I said, I'm making an album with Johnny Cash. You want to play bass? He's like, absolutely.
Tom playing bass.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I asked Mike if he would come and play. And then it ended up being all of the Heartbreakers, but we had it set up where anyone could pick up any instrument and play it. But for the most part, I mean, Tom did play some, he might have played some guitar, might have played some piano, but for the most part wanted to play bass just because it was fun for him. And everyone else just picked up whatever was interesting. And sometimes even we would do one take, it's like, oh, let me switch from guitar to piano and see what that sounds like. And it was really a fun session.
Johnny, at the time when you first started working with him, I've heard you talk about this, that he was playing the kind of clubs like dinner clubs or something like that.
Dinner theater.
It was kind of like where Aerosmith was at the time.
He'd been dropped from 2 labels. He probably hadn't had a popular record in 25 years.
Yeah. And the popularity of these records, did that surprise him?
It completely blew his mind. He couldn't believe it. He loved it. He loved the acceptance of young people. On the first album we put out, it really changed everything. And then when Hurt happened, and it was really a big hit, which again was not expected, he was ecstatic. It was really a beautiful life arc that he had all the success and then went through a little bit of a down period, and then he had the most success in the 70s. He was the biggest selling artist on Columbia Records. He sold more records than all the other artists on Columbia combined.
Wow.
And then they dropped him.
Yeah.
And then he signed to Mercury, and then they dropped him. And then he was just, in his mind, he was done, you know? And when we met the first time, he didn't know anything about me, he didn't know who I was, but he was more curious why I was interested. Why would anybody be interested? That was the feeling. What do you think you can do with me that no one else has done for the last 25 years?
And what did you say?
I said, let's just make something great. What are the songs that you want to sing? Like, play me the songs that you grew up singing. And I didn't really know. I just said, I just have a feeling something good will happen.
Johnny's gone, Tom's gone.
Chris Cornell's gone.
Chris Cornell's gone. When you hear them, they're here though. Kind of like we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
Time travel.
Yeah.
Does it ever get you down though, thinking about it?
I would say I miss them.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel connected to them. And I do miss them. But it's the way it is. Like, yeah. It's like the cycle of life. That's where we're all going. That's how it works.
I want to ask you about creativity, because this is a topic that you talk about in your book. If someone doesn't discover a piece of music that someone else will at some point, there's a stream of ideas out there that you just have to connect into.
Yeah.
How do you get better at doing that?
I think what's helpful is to have a confidence in when you feel it, to act on it. Because when you feel it, if you don't act on it, chances are someone else will do it. What I would say, like, tuning the antenna is really paying attention to what's going on in you and noticing what are the things that really light you up. What are the things that take your breath away? And it could be in music, but it could be in nature. It could be anywhere. Why do what happens when you see something in a movie that you're like, you can't believe it happened, and you get really taken by it? Or when you see a dramatic sunset, what happens? And tune into that feeling of, I would call it awe. And then when you're making things, that's kind of what we're reaching for. There's not a formula to get there, and the only way you know that it happens is when you can feel it inside. It's like it's this internal process of, you lean forward, you want to hear what happens next. It sparks your curiosity. If you want to stop it, that that's not that experience. These are experiences that you wish could go on forever. They're ecstatic. And finding those ecstatic experience and when you're making things, being patient enough to be surprised by them, because that's how it happens. It doesn't happen, rarely happens through intention. It happens more by accident, while you're planning something else, it comes upon you and you recognize it in the moment. Like the first Johnny Cash album we made wasn't planned to be that. Those were demos recorded in my living room of him playing me songs that they were demos to figure out which songs we were going to record in the studio with a band. That's what they were. They were recorded properly, but only for my purposes, not for,
Right.
Never thought they would be a record. The idea wasn't let's do an acoustic record at all. The idea was let's figure out what songs are interesting for you to sing, and then we'll figure out how to record them. Mm-hmm. And then I went in with Johnny and at least 2 different bands at 2 different times playing those songs, and they weren't better. And even though we have the best musicians and we're spending all this money in the studio, and it wasn't better. The stuff we recorded in the living room had more emotion to it. We didn't know that in advance. And allowing, being open enough that just because you put time and effort or have experts working on it or any of the things that make you think it's better, it always comes back to close your eyes and listen, which is sometimes it's the 5-minute demo.
Right.
That's better than you've heard so many cases where people talk about the record's not really good. Well, the demos were so great. It's an old story.
Right.
But if the demos are great, and if you don't beat them, then that's the record, and it's okay.
Right. It's 2024 now when we're making this interview. I call them conversations.
Yeah.
Is it difficult for people to be original when so much music has been written?
No, not at all. Everything's already been done, and your job is to find the new way to do it. And it happens all the time. And one of the magic pieces of the formula is when things that are not normally put together are put together. So the example of Aerosmith and Run-DMC.
Right.
That was, again, it wasn't done with the idea of it being popular, but it was an unusual combination. And the unusual combination allowed something to happen. Led Zeppelin have a song called Dire Maker. Mm-hmm. I didn't know this, but that's their attempt at playing reggae.
Reggae, yeah.
It doesn't sound like reggae.
No.
It sounds like a cool Led Zeppelin song.
Right.
So it's different because they're different. They interpret music in their way. So starting with things that exist in the world and putting them through your filter, you might find something. James Brown started, I didn't know this, I just learned this recently from a new documentary. James Brown started as a Little Richard, almost a Little Richard cover act, and sometimes when Little Richard couldn't make a show, James Brown would fill in for him. I never made that connection before. But then he became James Brown.
Right. What is your discovery mechanism for new music, typically?
Usually it's word of mouth. Someone suggests listening to something, or I just come across something in the world. There's an album I made, album that came out this year or last year, Marcus King.
Yeah, I know Marcus.
I just came across him playing. He was playing. I'd never heard of him before. He was playing at the Grand Ole Opry. I think he was 22 years old at the time. Mm-hmm. And I saw this guy on video on YouTube, blew me away, contacted him, and we made this really cool album. And he's amazing.
We talked yesterday a bit about YouTube. This is going to live on YouTube, this video. One of the things about YouTube is that you can find just about anything there, especially stuff that's unreleased or that is not in print anywhere. Mm-hmm. We live in a time where our phones can carry all types of music. Do you think that music is devalued in any way because of that, or it's just a convenience of the modern world?
I think both are true. I think the convenience is incredible. I love being able to listen to whatever I want, whenever I want, wherever I am. And it has changed the way we listen so that in the past, when you would buy a particular album and live with that album, he had a different relationship to it than when it's something that's just in the stream. And even today, when a new album by an album artist that I love comes out, I probably don't listen to it as much as I would have in those days. I don't know if it's a negative or a positive. It just is what it is. I suppose I could choose to force myself to listen as much as I used to, but it feels okay.
Rick, I appreciate you having me here today. This has been amazing. I look forward to seeing what you do here over the next few years and what kind of music you're making. And once again, it's such an honor to be here and talk to you.
Cool. My pleasure.
Thanks.
Even though we're done, can I play a couple songs?
Absolutely.
Pull up Marcus King. There's a song on his album I'd love you to hear.
Marcus King came by my house
Oh,
when he
great.
was 16 years old with
Great.
his dad. And he played for me and sang, and he was amazing.
He's
16,
unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
He's unbelievable. A song called Delilah.
Is that on Mood Swings?
Yeah.
Yeah, here it is.
When I first met you, didn't know a damn thing. Just set out to try to find